Well, Morning Star has been completed by me. This has not happened before. Something very strange. Um, First thing, before I get into my review and the synopsis of what all happened in this book, let me just talk about the actual publisher, Hotter and something. What is it called? Hotter and Stoughton. Okay, I do like how the front cover bends like a little way out from the spine, so you got this little bit of extra room here. So when you're holding it like this, it doesn't like rip the edges. Like if you see the bottom of my Wise Man's Fear, it got ripped because it doesn't have that. And it's a thick ass book, so you're holding it like this, putting pressure on it, it rips it. Good, that's very good. But I get to the end, the very last page. Let me read you the last sentence of this book. It is a gentle, long kiss that makes me forget the sand under. That's it. No period. So I go on Goodreads and I look up this edition and it says 518 pages. This says 514. So I'm missing the last 4 pages. So what the fuck happened? There's not usually there's like some extra stuff at the end, you know, like some coupon you fill out. And I'm 4 pages short. I'm gonna have to like get an ebook to figure out how this book ends. But anyway, up until that happened, 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5. It still doesn't beat Wise Man's Fear, but it's like Wise Man's Fear in that it's good 100% of the book all the way through. The second book, Golden Sun, up there, I liked it. I liked the Iron Rain part of it. I like where he's jumping around on the tables. But I don't really remember all that much else about it because there's a lot of weird space battles and it's kind of confusing, all the action. Maybe I need to reread it. But this, it kept my attention. Everything was pretty much explained all the way through. The only thing I'm confused about is the technology, because they talk about these razors they have, and sometimes they talk about them being on their wrists, sometimes they talk about them having like a handle, sometimes they're throwing them, but they wrap around your wrist like the metal does, like a whip, and you hit a button and it takes a shape like a question mark, like a scythe, or you can make it like a straight sword, or you can make it short, or it's kind of like a chain. I was imagining it in the first book like a laser whip, but it's not. It's metal. And you whip it and it makes different shapes and you can hold this shape. It's kind of like carbon nanotubes or something that they're forming into different shapes, I guess. But then you throw it and it doesn't lose its shape. Kind of strange. Then they got like these pulse fists and pulse boots. They're like hover boots. And like the ships have different like names. They start out with a short word and then they capitalize the second word, and it's a little bit confusing, but it's fine. So, get into the spoiler part of this book. It starts out, the second book, I think the Jackal had taken Darrow prisoner. And it starts out, he's in like this prison cell for like a year. He's tortured for 3 months and he's been in this cell for 9 months, and it's just like completely silent. He kind of hears voices off of the distance, so he doesn't know like who it is, if it's other prisoners, what it is going on, you know. And they have a tube going into him that like keeps him alive. It kind of feeds him and takes his waste away, but he doesn't like have any contact with anybody or anything. Pure isolation, torture for 9 months. And then you find out he's been in the Jackal's living room in his coffee table for the whole time. So you're like, the people he's hearing is him up there just having dinner or whatever. It's so fucked up. And then, oh my god, Severo is like the star of this book. Darrow does some cool shit too, but Severo, all the best scenes are Severo pretty much, and there's a lot of like big, like rousing speeches and like, oh, I forgot to mention this. The other night I cried. I'm gonna be a man and admit it. I was having a dream about Double D, and in the dream she had these 2 kids, I think, And like they're not the kids that she had in real life though. They're different kids. And one of them jumped up in my arms and like she was in a church and I'm walking away from her. I don't know what this symbolizes or whatever. So I'm thinking maybe it's supposed to mean that like those are the kids I could have had with her or something. I woke up and I started crying about it a little bit. Not a big deal. But then when I started reading this book at work, there's some scenes in this book that almost made me cry too. Twice in a day. It's pretty dope. I like crying. It's fun. Gets all your emotions out as a man. It's good to like, you know, wear pink sometimes like LeBron and cry sometimes. Anyway, Severo. Good God. The Goblin. The, what was his name? The Howlers. He has all the Howlers. He's like, if you've seen those movies where you have a sniper and he's laying in wait in a pond or something and he like comes out at the last second, he's like an ace in the hole and he's just been waiting and hiding. That's what Severo is. There's one scene where it's just they're having this big space battle and it just keeps saying this happens and this happens. Severo remains hiding. Like nobody knows where he is, but wherever he is, he's just sitting there. He's waiting for it to be like jump out and like save the day. And at one point he's off doing a bunch of shit. You know, he saves Darrow from the coffee table prison, but he sends some other people. He designates authority, which is a great quality in a leader. Like he's not even there, but he's been looking for him for like a year. Finally the mission comes down where he can save him and he's like, I got other things to do, y'all handle this business. And he comes in, he's wearing like this undersuit that's been under his armor and his spacesuit and all this shit, and he's all sweaty and shit. And this line you will never forget, like Darrow meets him, he's like, what's that smell? And he's like, he grabs his crotch, he's like, it's a Severo soup in here. I'm like, oh my God, that's gross. It's like BO and sweat in his crotch. It was like amazing line though. And Severo his main quality is loyalty. He's like the Hufflepuffs from Harry Potter. You think he's gonna like leave, and he has all these like arguments and stuff with Darrow and stuff, and then like just when you think he's about to turn traitor, he just starts crying and he puts his head in Darrow's lap, and Darrow comforts him, and he's like, he's back and everything's good again. It's crazy. It's awesome. Then you got this guy named Quicksilver. The Silvers are like the bankers, and he is supposedly they're going to like take him captive because the war effort, they need him, like he's a key figure. And then it turns out he's one of the sons of Ares. He's like on their team. So then he bursts into this meeting with Mustang and all these like golds, and then this Quicksilver guy, and they don't know what's going on, so they have a big war, and like a lot of people get killed. But then they eventually figure out that they're on the same side. Mustang comes back to him. It's pretty cool. And then Ragnar from Iron Gold. He's like this huge Viking warrior guy. Obsidian, just a warrior guy. Awesome character. You have to imagine him as that big guy from Guardians of the Galaxy. That's the only way I think you can imagine him. Severo I kind of imagine as the guy with the mohawk on the new Karate Kid TV show, Cobra Kai. I don't know if that's who would play him in the show. There needs to be a movie about this. Maybe it'd have to be a TV series because it's so long, though. Yeah, so Ragnar's really cool, and they have to go to his home planet, and then they're on this spaceship that gets shot down, and then Ragnar is like kind of weird. He's acting weird, and he ends up telling like, you know, my mother's not going to agree to this. They need to get all the obsidian, like the Valkyries, you know, that live on this. There's this ice planet where everybody believes that the Golds are gods, and they're kind of like living a Viking culture because they don't know any better. They don't know like the technology and stuff. So he's saying we're going to have to kill my mother. That's the only way to like get everybody on their side because she'll never agree to it. She like worships these gods. She's like a fanatic or whatever. And she actually knew about the Golds not being really gods, but it's like they get into a position of power and they want to keep it and kind of stuff like that. And then there's this really cool quote on page 197 that says, "Do you know how the Inuit tribes of Earth killed wolves? slower and weaker than the wolves, they chiseled knives till they were razor sharp, coated them in blood, and stuck them upright in the ice. Then the wolves would come and lick the blood, and as the wolf licks faster and faster, he's so ravenous he doesn't realize until it's too late that the blood he's drinking is his own. So wolves would bleed themselves out by licking bloody obsidian daggers. Pretty fucking dope. So then they get shot down. They have a plane crash, and then like some of the Vikings have turned cannibal, so they come and attack, and they have to survive them. And the Golds got shot down also at the same time. So they went to they were going to use their survival equipment because they were all going to die. They were pretty much out there on this planet by themselves. No way to contact anybody. So then I made a note here that people in this book, they treat their bodies like androids. They still feel pain, but they have these people called carvers that can kind of change anything. Like Darrow gets his hand cut off at one point. I don't know if he'll be able to put it back on. But for the most part, like Severo, when Darrow had his eyes changed in the first book because he had to go from a red to a gold, and he had his hair color changed, and he had his bones strengthened, and he had his eyes replaced, I think. Severo took his old eyes because somebody poked Severo's eyes out, I think, in one of the books. And he took Darrow's eyes because he's his brother, or wants to be his brother. I don't remember. They were both, I forgot how, they're both reds, I think. I thought Severo was gold, though. His dad was gold, but then he was the son of Ares or something like that. I can't remember how it worked out. They also got this stuff called res flesh, which is like you use it to patch up gunshot wounds and claw, like scars and stuff. And it just like seals up like silly putty with microorganisms in it that like regrows flesh on top of your holes. It's really weird. So then they find out that Jackal stole 400 nuclear with like way high megaton yields. So like, you're supposed to have 5 megaton yields is the only thing you're allowed to have on a spaceship. He stole a bunch of the big ones that you use like bombard planets with. And then they got the evidence of that, and they're having this kind of debate between their enemies that are on the Golds with Roke. He's like this poet guy. He's been sent there to get the help of the Rim Lords, these moon lords that like live on the outer planets, the moons of Jupiter and Saturn and stuff. And one of their planets had been previously burned to death, like with nukes, and they used this information to act like Jackal's gonna like come after them, and it like wins them the help from those guys. So then when the big space battle comes, Darrow is like burning his way into the cockpit, and he gets in there. Oh, that's a great scene. They're not going to be able to get there in time, but they have this thing that goes over the intercom, and it says to any of the lower colors, if you will open any of the doors and let us through, you can help us with the uprising. Because he gives all these great speeches about rising tides, and he's the Reaper of Mars and all this kind of shit's dope. So they're not going to make it, and they're going to lose. And all of a sudden, the door just opens. They go inside, and they're looking at the little pink girl. She's got her hand on the button. She's like, let them in. There's like a troop of golds, or a troop of obsidians with some gold leaders, like giving them orders over here. You got the one guy that's like organizing the fleet, the Roke guy, that they let go. Because if they just killed him, it would have been dishonorable. But they let him go to like kill most of their friends and shit on these battleships. That was the price of honor. And like, this pink girl just lets him in. He looks at her and he's like, even you, Amathea, or whatever her name was? And then he ends up having to kill himself. I mean, this is some major spoilers. I shouldn't make videos like this, but it's fucking sick. I just gotta let you know how sick it is. Yeah, and then, like, another big spoiler. Ragnar didn't live through the battle with Aja, or whatever her name is. So he ends up, Darrow and Darrow Mustang end up getting his sister on their side. And his sister ends up killing her own mother because she knew her mother knew about the golds being fake. So then she has all these like female Valkyrie Vikings and stuff. They're just massive 7-foot tall people. And they start popping mushrooms on the way into this giant battle because it like gives them berserker mode. And she's offering them mushrooms. Says, it'll help you see dragons. And they're like, no, we're good. So then Sephi ends up turning on everybody. You're constantly worrying about this one, Victra and Mustang. Like, can they be trusted? You keep wondering, are they going to, like, switch things around? Because the next book is called Iron Gold, and then after that's called Dark Age. And everybody says, like, just read the first 3 books because it was meant to be 3-book trilogy, and then they added 2 more books, and then now there's another book after that the cover is a horse, which is what Mustang is. And there's another book that's been announced that's coming after that one. So I'm thinking shit gets really bad in Dark Age, and it ruins all the good times and the good ending that I suppose is in the last 4 pages that I didn't get to read of this book. So then after Dark Age, I'm thinking the one with the Mustang on the front maybe gets better again, and then the one that's coming makes it get even better again. So maybe it is worth reading past book 3. That's why I didn't have book 4, 5, or 6 on my TBR, because I didn't want to ruin it. But now I don't know. I have to keep thinking about it. Oh yeah, and then Darrow nukes the docks of the guy that they got on his side, because he's like winning a future war. He's like, the next 50 years we don't have to worry about these Rim Lords coming after us. He's gonna act like he's still trying to burn his way into that door, and the Pink Girl didn't let him in, and that Roke did it. He's making it look like Roke did nuke the docks instead of him. We can blame it on them, and like, but the guy didn't fall for it, but he couldn't really like accuse him either, so it kind of worked out. And then there's just a part where Darrow and Cassius like been his enemy since he found out that he killed his brother in the original book. And he takes him prisoner, and they just end up watching home movies when they were having their crazy battles at the Institute. And like remembering the good time sitting around the campfire, and you like this girl, and everybody was like doing all this kind of stuff, and they just sit around and watch home movies. And then he gives him this data hollow cube, and he says, watch this later. And he don't really tell you what's going on right there. And then later, it turns out, when he watched it, what the fuck was on it? Oh, it was showing how they killed his family and didn't tell him. So there's this great thing at the end I'm not going to tell you about. So I'm not going to spoil the very end shit. But there's a point where Mustang says, I've got an idea, I've got a plan. And she tells everybody, and everybody laughs. Here's what we're going to do. And everybody laughs. So then people start getting killed. You're like, oh shit, shit's going down. Things are going bad. And you're like, wait a minute, she's told everybody what we're going to do, and everybody laughed. I know what's going on. I figured it out. I knew what was going on. There was a fucking, fake death thing coming up. So that worked out great. So then the Jackal, he puts out a video where he found Uncle Neril from the original book. Everybody loves Uncle Neril. And he just fucking executes him on this video and pisses everybody off. Starts this revolution. That's what started Sephi, like, turning on everybody because she respects strength or something like that. And then, I forgot how they got Sephi back on their side. The way they got it back on her side. Sevro, so she was just like, they're just like, kill all the golds. All the lower colors just like, fuck off. They have a bunch of golds allied with them. So Jackal made them hate the gold so much that they had infighting. They had the low colors just saying like, fuck the golds. They're just like fighting each other. So then Severo jumps up and he takes Cassius. He says, this gold is a murderer. What do we do to murderers? We hang him, right? So he hangs him and he just throws him off and he just hangs him. He's sitting there like choking and dying. I thought he was dead. But then it says, Severo says, I'm a murderer. What do we do to murderers? We hang him. He just throws the rope on his own neck, does a fucking backflip, and starts hanging himself. So then Sephi says the point of it all is like, everybody's a murderer. We can't just like kill all the goats just because they're not great people that can be redeemed and stuff. And she cuts both of their things and saves them both. Fucking sick. So yeah, then he gets married. Victra sees him do that, and she goes and proposes to him. And then they get married, and like apparently in this universe, you take the house, the oldest house, you take their last name. And then she's like, no, I don't want to be with my family, name anymore because they're assholes, and she takes his name. It's dope. And then, yeah, all the ending shit. I'm not going to tell you anymore. There's so much more. As much as I spoiled, I left out a lot of good shit at the end. Except for the last 4 pages, because I don't know what happened in there. But let's just say those 400 nukes come back to bite people in the ass. And then it goes real bad. But, you know, it ends on a good note. Let's just say that. Fucking great. Yeah, 5 out of 5, 100% all the way through. Great read.